So what happens when you're shoved into a corner that you didn't choose and everything that you thought you'd be doing with your life suddenly isn't? In this episode of the Life After Ministry podcast, I sit down with Jon Talbert, pastor, pro sports chaplain, and co-founder on the team with Forte. And let me tell you, this is a raw conversation about calling, collapse, and starting over. Jon's dad was the legendary pastor of the same church that I would come to help lead years later, but we only recently discovered how much overlap and shared DNA that we have. We talk about what it feels like to be abruptly sidelined, why grief sometimes needs to stew in the jacuzzi for a while, and how God still builds something beautiful from what feels broken. And I'll be honest, there were moments in this conversation I forgot we were recording. This one is unfiltered. It's redemptive and painfully real in all the right ways. This is Jon Talbert on the Life After Ministry podcast. Oh, hey, Jon Talbert, welcome to the Life After Ministry podcast. Glad to have you here.
It's good to be with you, my friend, and to jump on here and connect up. It's be fun.
Yeah. We kind of surprisingly, we got connected just a bit ago and realized just how much of a backstory and crossover we have in just about every possible way.
Yeah. I mean, going back to, the church you worked at for a period of time, and that was the church I grew up in. So, it's crazy. All the common folks that, it's weird. You look at your LinkedIn profile of people that you have connection with, even if you don't know the person, you're like, oh, I know you through this, through these mutual friends. So that gave an indication of where our friendship connections were.
So you're a pastor's kid, and were you just destined to become a pastor? Did you even have a choice?
No, you know what? I remember. I think I was in junior high. My dad was speaking at a camp, and it was for high schoolers. But I'm obviously there, and I would always go to places that my dad was at, and then he made a call for people committing their lives to not just to faith, but for those that were in faith. And I made a decision as a young child, and I had a pretty good idea of what I was, what my faith was about. Going to junior high and that type of thing. But I was at that camp. I made a decision. I was like, yeah, I believe I'm supposed to do this full time. And I didn't think about full time. It was one of those, here, my Lord, send me messages that my dad gave me, that my dad gave. And I was one of the kids that stood up. And I remember that because I remember thinking, I'm going to head into this. And I'd have moments of flirting with another job, or profession. My dad was a classic car enthusiast. And I remember being under the car with him one time, and just, we'd work on these classic cars. And he said, we were talking, and I said, Dad, maybe I want to be an auto mechanic. He stopped doing what he was doing. He looked at me, grease in his hands and his face. He's like, you do not want to become an auto mechanic. I'm like, oh, noted. So there was times where you flirt with, and you think, oh, I'm going to be a rock star or a pro athlete. I think every guy goes through that. And then you realize, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. So, yeah, but I felt a call to ministry very early on in my life.
So saved you from the auto mechanic world and let you dive right into the ministry space there. Somehow that'd be much easier, better, higher paying job, right?
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, it depends. But yeah, less I want to say less frustration, but who knows? There might be very similar pastoral ministry and classic car repair.
Yeah. So I want to, I don't want to spend too much time in your church ministry world, but you've had a couple of transitions and they've been a little bit different. And I want to lean into, because I think that your life after ministry is very unique, but I also think that you can speak some hope and give some wisdom for people who are in that transition season. But tell me about the ministry transitions you experienced.
Sure. It's interesting. I started out as a pastor at a church in the Bay Area as a college pastor. I served there for 8 years, and then transitioned to another church in 2004. And was a teaching pastor and outreach, doing a lot of outreach stuff in the community. And we were really early on in the idea of serving the community in a unique way and building that out. And so I was involved in really building out a ministry in the Bay Area in the South Bay that really took off and had a lot of momentum and stuff like that. And so it was really fun. And it was weird. After that, I did that for 10 years as a pastor at that church. And I got recruited. And it was weird because I thought I was going to stay at that church for the rest of my life. I mean, it was that kind of church where I'm like, I remember telling my wife I could stay here and finish my career out as long as they'd have me. And, this CEO of a major tech company in the Silicon Valley came and brought together some pastors, and I was one of them, and wanted to start something that was like looking at the Bay Area at large. And so he, after a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations, I actually left that church, and he recruited me out of that church, and he recruited our lead pastor to be on the board of an organization that was very apostolic and building really what you would call a city gospel movement for the Bay Area. And I did that for 7 years, and it was a good transition. But I remember going, I'm leaving a team that I really love. I remember leaving. But it was a willful choice, and I'm like, here's where we're going, and going, okay, this is going to be a weird journey, but I feel like it's the right thing to do, and a real confirmation of my family. But I went from being on a really amazing team to being kind of almost a solo operator. I had a board, I had an admin, and it was me the first year, and it was a risk. And I remember asking the guy that hired me, can you give me any guarantees? He says, there's no guarantees. I'll pay you really well, but there's no guarantees. And I'm like, well, damn, that sucks. But it was it felt like it was the right thing, the right move, because it really equipped me in my gifts. And so it was a really good transition, but I did feel a sense of vulnerability. Like, if this doesn't work out, I hope I can go back to that other place, or I think I'm hireable. If this guy's willing to recruit me out of this thing, I certainly felt like I had some hope. So that was the first transition. And it was a good one.
That kind of 5-year, you want the 5-year, 10-year plan, right? Like guarantee that like I can kind of see trajectory going out from this.
Yeah.
I
mean, I'm leaving a tenured position. I'm leaving a senior role at a very influential church in the Bay Area that I felt like it was like we were on to something. God was doing unique stuff through our ministry and through the work that I felt like I was doing. And it was really, the offer was connecting to the pieces that I had learned in that journey, that 10-year journey with that church, and connecting those pieces to where, you're going to do this, but I'm really broadening your borders, and it's going to be this greater thing. And I'm like, that's scary, but I'm like, and I had so many people that know me well that were like, dude, this is right down the fairway for you. This is so in your lane. And it was very much in my lane. So I, took a risk, felt vulnerable for my family, but everybody was like, okay, let's do this. This will be amazing. And it was an amazing journey. It was super fun. I loved it. It was a great role for me, and it fit my personality. I was able to build and shape. When you're joining an organization and you're given permission to add color, but not shape. This was adding shape and color to what the actual organization looks like. It has my fingerprints and my ethos all over it. And so I felt like that was a really great fit for me. But, fast forward 7 years and a transition out of that was painful. That's the other transition that didn't work out so well. So, yeah.
What do you do?
Want me to jump into that one too? I can jump into that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a falling out with senior leadership. One of my colleagues there, and we didn't see eye to eye on some things, and it broke our relationship at that time. And I was let go, and abruptly, and I still feel very unjustly in the way that was done, and the reasons as to why. And there was a lot of questions, a lot of heartbreak from my family. And it was like, my family went into what the hell just happened mode. And there's still some hard pieces that are associated with that. But aside from the the emotion of that break. The thing that I've talked to my wife about this at length, the thing that I struggled with the most was, what am I supposed to do with this? The relationships that I have and that I've built, nobody knows what I know. Nobody has the vision and the view that I have. Nobody. And so I feel like this is going to kill the momentum. Not that I'm that great person, but it was a unique spot for me. And then it's just done. Like, and not like, hey, we're going to phase out. No, it was effective immediately, which, is like, what scandal did you cause when that happens? Right. And then that's where I was like, I was mad. I'm like, why would you do this to me? So, but I struggled with, what am I supposed to do with what I know? And all that I've gained along the way, and my education, my master's in divinity, my doctorate in theology, and all these things that I had, I'm like, well, this sucks. And really going back to the local church as I'm like, I've already kind of moved out of the local church into an apostolic role. Felt like could I get hired back at a church? Probably. Yeah, I'm fairly confident I could get hired back at a church, but that was the wrong move for me. And so I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And so it just felt like, I was in a funk and felt like I did not know what to do. And I had job opportunities and offers and different things that came my way, but I'm still like struggling with like, what am I supposed to do with what I know and how I've been equipped to serve? 'Cause I have to reprogram, reposition, retool all these things inside me if I'm going to do something different. And so there was a struggle for sure. So that was 4 years ago.
When you look at this idea of like cumulative calling, like you had a couple of different experiences that bring about this kind of sum total of knowledge, experience, skill set. But there's some people, they've just been behind the pulpit for 20, 25 years. And they're like, all I ever know is just being a pastor. But how do you get out of that, kind of back yourself into a corner? And then how do you work your way out of that and say, actually, there's more here than what I'm actually looking at?
Yeah. Yeah. And back yourself in a corner is generous. I think sometimes you get shoved in the corner or you get tossed in the corner and you're like, okay, you sit over here, you've been sidelined for whatever reason, whether it's self-imposed or unjustly or, scandal, whatever it may be, you're tossed in the corner and broken. And you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? And part of it, I needed to sit with the grief of it. You know what I mean? Like it goes back to that first question, when I started, I felt called as a junior hire and had oriented my life towards this. And it just crashed on me and broke. And I had to sit with the broken pieces. I'm like, well, then there's this, and then there's this. And I had to really process with my family too, because, in ministry, it's not like my family has a vested interest and a vested time in the work that I've done. And so now they're like, what the F? I got to help manage their emotions too, because I don't want them to be angry at the church, and I want them to be angry at, why is God doing? So I needed to help process them, but I had to sit with my own pain point of that and just feel it. I had to feel the weight of it and be mad. And when you're in that state, you're projecting blame. And you go through phantom arguments in your head of what you should have said or would have said it's like you're swimming and you get in a jacuzzi and you boil for a while, but you just can't stay in the jacuzzi forever. You got to get out. And it's okay to boil. I needed to boil. I needed to be frustrated. I needed to, in my mind, flip somebody off and say, and just have that moment, because it broke me. But I knew I couldn't stay there. And so I knew I had a role in processing that pain point. And then I had a role in helping my family recognize that, and to model like, okay, now what? And so I had to help my family process some of that. And I needed to talk to people that were the inner circle. Everybody has the concentric circles. So you got the people that commiserate or but you've got people that are truth tellers, that I needed some truth tellers in my life. I had some guys out in Colorado that were close to me that hired me for a short period of time in the transition, and they were truth tellers. I have a buddy who's a executive pastor out here. We've been friends for a long time and still close friends. And so I needed that close circle. And for them to have the freedom to say, well, you are kind of being an ass or whatever, to speak into things, not to there was enough water under the bridge in that relationship that if it were just somebody in a counseling situation, they might not have said it, but because they're that close a friend, they can say, yeah, maybe have you thought of this? And so I needed that because it allowed me to think through the broken pieces of that. And then also they were there for the rebuild. Like, okay, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what this is. And them speaking into that. Because you got a lot of people that, in pastoral ministry, you have a lot of fans, people that follow and love you. And, people sometimes so much so that you can do no wrong, which is not good, but they're always going to fan or fawn over you. That's fine. I need the person that is in my face, but on my side. And so I had I had those people that were like, okay, they journey through that pain point. And then as I'm opening up and new opportunities open up, they're like, this is good. This is the right thing. And this is a new fit. So as part of that retooling, that was a long answer to your short question, but yeah.
No, I got a lot of notes. This is good. And I feel the same. Been there, done that, felt that. I like the stewing in the jacuzzi. It feels like you don't want to get out, but you really can't sit there forever.
You can't. No, you'll wrinkle up, dude. You'll wrinkle up, metaphorically and physically. You're just like, what is happening to me? And I've said that before. Like, it's okay. It's okay to get in jacuzzi. Just plan on getting out. You just can't stay in there forever.
So how long were you there? How long were you in the jacuzzi, and what got you out?
I had moments where I would go in intentionally and I'd be like, okay, I need to be pissed off for a little bit. And I was strategic about who and where, because the mission of what we were doing and because of me being known in the Bay Area, if I wanted to go scorched earth and go public and do this, I'm going to tweet this and all that nonsense, I wasn't going to do it because the mission and the work that we were doing was so important. And I'd given my life to making sure that happened. It's funny, 4 years later, I have pastors that will say, I still don't really know what happened. I'm like, great. I don't need you to know. Just know that it didn't end well, but God is good. And here's where we are today. And so that was important, but there were seasons where I needed to get back in and process, like, let me go through this one more time. And somebody would help me go through it one more time. So that was super important, but it's probably a year of feeling it. You know what I mean? It took me about a year, but it wasn't like I was in the jacuzzi for a year. I would just go in it and I would have that conversation with somebody and we'd circle back, or I'd talk to my family about some stuff and be really frustrated. I just couldn't stay. I needed to be angry, but I couldn't stay mad. You know what I mean? So that was so it was about a year, about a year kind of going in and out of that angst and frustration mode.
Maybe Elon Musk and Donald Trump should have gone in the jacuzzi a little bit.
Watching what had happened publicly, in my mind, I'm like, regardless of what side you fall on, I'm like, don't do this like this. Just call. Just get on the phone, or have it. I'm sure there's probably stuff like that happens all the time, but it's behind closed doors where it should be. And have your frustration, have your like, why does he not see the way I see it? Whatever else. And then, but to do it publicly, it does damage. And I felt like if I do this publicly, it's going to create, the whole scorched earth thing. And I just am not going to do that. The church is too important.
4 years later. Yeah. 4 years later, you're out and God has you on a trajectory and you have a lot of stuff going. you're a pastor, you're a connector, you're a pro sports chaplain. That's cool. And then you have founded this group, this thing called Forte. I want to hear about all of those things, but it takes a lot of energy. Where are you getting all of do you feel like a new sense of like there's wind beneath your wings in this season?
It's one of those things where sometimes you look at it and you're like, okay, I couldn't have made this up. Just a real quick, just course correction for listeners. I am on the founding team with two co-founders. So two guys that co-founded the company. Yes, with Forte. So yeah, I've been doing sports chaplaincy since the 90s. And by request, I got asked to do something way back in the day with the Cincinnati Bengals, which is so weird and so random. And then from that, I was just, working with NFL teams and working with Christian outreach stuff for NFL and MLB, and then was with the San Jose Earthquakes chaplain for about 6 years. And then was asked to become the Giants and the A's chaplain. So I served the Giants for a short period of time while they were looking for a new chaplain up in that area, and then became the Oakland Athletics until they moved. And then it was like shortly after they moved, CrossFit called. Big CrossFit Games had a tragedy. And if your listeners are CrossFit aware, they had a tragedy in the games last year where one of the star athletes drowned in one of the events. And it really rocked the whole CrossFit community at large. And so the director, Dave Castro, called me and asked if I would consider becoming the chaplain. They've never had one, the chaplain to the CrossFit Games. And so I agreed. I think it's going to be a great opportunity to minister in that area where I've been ministering since the 90s with the lead athletes. So, but yeah, I did that. And then, right when I first got parted ways with that organization, that Christian organization I was working with, I got asked by two guys to say, hey, we want you to come on full time in some consulting thing. We want to, cover you in this time frame. And I considered doing that for a while. But then the two guys out of Stanford that were putting together this mental fitness platform for the marketplace, they brought me in there and they said, hey, how are you doing this for the Oakland A's? From your kind of Christian biblical worldview in a secular organization. So I started meeting with them and consulting with them. And they were like, hey, we want you to join the team. We're putting this together. We're a venture-backed company that we wanted to bring our biblical worldview of soul care and mental wellness, which we now are really appropriated the idea of mental fitness, an upstream model of caring for individuals before it gets too far down the road. And so we launched that 4 years ago, and I've been with them ever since. Had no idea that I look back and I'm like, you cannot have made this up. I'm a pastor to church. I get recruited to be an apostolic leader for the Bay Area, which is large. And then the bottom falls out. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with all like my relationship with pastors and all the stuff I was building and working with educators and nonprofits and all the stuff I was doing there now goes to a national approach to where I am serving and working with denominations, pastoral groups, educators, both in private and public Christian schools across the nation. And I'm like, I look back, I'm like, how did this happen? Because I didn't make it happen. It just happened. But it was one of those things where I'm like, I had to stay open to the idea that I'm a connector. That goes all the way back to my childhood, that I'm a connector. So I'm going to be in that realm. I have a biblical worldview of God's redeeming mankind and refining our character through things. And that's been in my teaching and my understanding of, Scripture and how God uses Scripture to refine who we are and call us to something else. And then I jump into this group and they're like, we need what you bring in order to shape this methodology to bring wellness to the global marketplace. And that's when you're like, wait, what? And then but I didn't plan it. I just had to be like, it can't be in the same lane. It can't be in the church lane. It has to be, it's like, here's my lane. I had to look at it like, okay, just flatten your hands out a little bit. And it just opens up the playing field a little bit. And it took a cumulative effect of accumulative learnings and pain points that I went through to recognize I never would have thought of this. I never would have thought of this ever. Now I'm on a weird national stage. How did that happen? I get asked to speak at all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, that never would have happened before. So now I'm leveraging my speaking gift and leveraging the relationships that I have here and using them in such a way to say, okay, how is God positioning this greater narrative of redemption and redemptive work for those of, faith and goodwill? How do I bring that to the greater population, in the lane that I'm in? So yeah, it was nutty. It was nutty. You can't make it up. That's where I was like, people ask me, how'd you get here? I'm like, I have no idea. Short of, I had to get out. I had to not look at my lane. I had to look at the field. That was my lane before, but I had to look at my field. It's still the same. I'm still moving in the same direction, but the field just opened up to marketplace and government and education and nonprofit. And I'm like, what? And still have my, skill sets. I just needed to refine them a little bit more in that broader field. Sorry, that was a long. I got to shorten my answers up, but these are long answers.
This is good. I just wondered, like, I've had moments where I've like, this is amazing. The Lord is good. You feel content right now. Do you ever, because of past experiences, do you ever allow yourself to just be grateful and sit in it? Or is there always a sense of the rug could be pulled out from underneath me again? And how do I prepare for that?
Here's what I've learned. When you're a pastor and you've been in the pastoral realm, or you're in a nonprofit leader, you jump to a venture-backed startup, game changer. Like it is, the pace is so fast. The technology is spot on. You have to fail fast. You have to iterate. You need to communicate what your learnings are. Where we're just like, okay, that didn't work, and so I don't want to. That was a bad sermon. I'm just going to take it offline. It is such a different world, and I had to learn. I'm 61, and I'm the oldest guy on the team. I'm on with a bunch of millennials that are just fast paced and driven, and Stanford, GSB guys that I'm like, these guys are crushing it. And I had to learn how to speed up. The people on our team are the same age as my kids. And so there's something that's there. Our CEO, who's probably the best CEO, best boss I've ever worked for, he'll say this all the time. He says, one of the things that I appreciate about you is that you're old enough to be my dad, and yet you still remain teachable and malleable, that you can like learn and take direction and whatever else. And that maybe that came from me being under a car with my dad and learning how to tighten, loose, lug nuts in the Austin Healey that we were rebuilding. But I think when you're in a position of rebuilding and relearning stuff, there's a posture of not false humility or self-deprecating kind of humility, but just like, I'm here to learn, and I'm here to understand the culture and to be in a place where I can contribute something that is meaningful for other people. And knowing that, I have 61 years of experience, I have a number of years of some pastoral experience that lean into this, and I can speak into people's lives. I know that I can do that for sure. And so when those moments come, I do it. But, staying humble and staying in a posture of I'm willing to learn from people that are the same age as my kids. And that's okay. Because if I couldn't do that, no way in hell am I going to work at this place. Just no way they would have me and be like, no, you should do it this way. Trust me, they're teaching stuff at Stanford. They ain't teaching at Biola. You know what I mean? They teach it in seminary. It's a whole nother. It was funny. I was talking to a pastor and I said, what's the one class in seminary you wish you would have taken? You wish they had offered? And he paused and he was like, hostage negotiation would have been a great class in seminary.
True.
So, yeah.
We see a lot of pastors who are taking a nosedive in the world today, but you've seen implosions, whether that's rock stars, whether that's athletes, movie stars. Is there a through line? Is there is something that they all have in common?
It's interesting. I came up with this theory just watching how kind of, the more public implosions. Rock stars, the human condition is not meant to be worshipped. It's not. And so when the rock star is on stage and he begins to receive the worship, like I went to, I think it was, Coldplay or Paul McCartney or something like that. I went to some concert and I remember turning around and looking at the crowd and I'm like, this is just like a Hillsong thing. Like it's fog machines and lights and everyone's hands are up. And I'm like, this is just like a really cool church service. The only difference was who they were worshiping. The human condition is not designed to be worshiped. And when it is, it actually does physiological damage. It's almost like saying, hey, I've got some uranium and I hand it to you and you like, oh, wow, this is really wonderful and bright and shiny. And then you realize it's actually killing you. Well, that's what misplaced worship does. It actually, it kills you. And you see they all implode the same way with drugs and alcohol because they can't. Something about being worshipped and not being worthy to be worshipped leads them down that similar path. And that's rock stars. With athletes, something about it has to do with money and something about being in a position of affluence or being in a position that you are flooded with money. And so many athletes become bankrupt after a short period of time because they were never designed to be just dumped here. Here's the deal, and here's the thing you're signing. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is just like, it's like stupid money. And the similarity of them stewarding resources on that level and not being prepared or whatever else to do that, they implode the same way, they go bankrupt. And then with actors, you get in scenes where, the common thread of actors imploding is, extramarital affairs or, marriages in and out of marriages, that kind of stuff. Well, you're in these scenes where you're kissing or making out or love scene or whatever it may be with someone who's not your spouse. Your body, your physiology doesn't know that. Your physiology is just doing what it's designed to do. And you qualified as acting, but your body doesn't. And so what we see is the fallout from that. And it's interesting. And so I see that's a common thread in those three very unique lanes. And you see it happen over and over again. Worship, money, and sex or false love. And I think pastors can fall into that same loop on some level to where your identity isn't grounded or you start believing what you think people think about you. Or you misplace money or the relationships or something like that. And there's a common interwoven thread between those things that I see that when pastors aren't grounded in who they are, identity, true north, all those things, it's super easy to see that evolve. So that's a theory I have, at least as far as athletes, rock stars, and actors. It's pretty consistent when you watch how they implode. They all implode the same way in that lane. It's the same implosion. Why is it drugs and alcohol for them? And why is it extramarital affair for them? And why is it bankruptcy? Why? Because you weren't designed for that. It's totally. So anyway, that's just maybe I'll write a paper or a book on that someday.
You'll have lots of examples you can use. No problem.
Pastors haven't, there's all kinds of things that cause them to implode. Or I think maybe even some, for some of the folks that are listeners or people that are tuning into your podcast, that some of it's justified and some of it's not. To where like for me, I felt like what just happened. So it can be both ways. So I realized some people self-implode. So you were going to ask. Go ahead.
I think pastors can implode in all three of those categories, right?
Yeah, right.
right? The more the fame, the more the money, the more the being worshipped by females, whatever that looks like. You're vulnerable to all of that.
Well, I will tell you. Well, so since I left, when I left the church, I still do interim pastor work. So I've never been in a small church in my life. We both came from a really large church in Southern California. My dad was on staff there. I moved up here to the Bay Area and worked at large churches. And that was the lane. I got hired in those churches. That's fine. Being an interim pastor in two really small churches back to back, I just finished an interim for a year at a small church. God, it really connects you to just like, this is just the heart of what, like, it's shepherding people and caring for, at 61, I'm the youngest guy in the church, and I'm like, these people they love Jesus, and they want to see, the church change. And that's just, so there was something really sweet about staying in, because being an interim connected me deeply to my, like, it wasn't about the fog machines and the big fancy thing of the big church, which was cool. It was fun to be part of that, but just to be, in a pure sense of, hey, here's the Bible. Let me tell you what it says. This is what I believe, and then sharing and caring for people in heartache. That really, really regrounded me at 60 of, this is the church, man. This is what it looks like. So, yeah.
Good, right? Just strip it all away and have it be simple again.
Yeah. It was really, really simple, really sweet.
Speaking of simple, tell me about your multi-generational living setup.
Yeah, it's interesting. My wife and I, our kids are, they're all in their 30s. One's almost 40. And 4 kids, and we have 8 grandkids. And then my parents were down in Southern California. As we said, my dad was a pastor at a church down there and retired in San Diego. And it was a unique season about 8 years ago where my dad was struggling with spinal stenosis, and where he's having a hard time managing his property and walking up and down stairs, stuff like that. And then my son and his wife, they had a daughter who got really sick before she turned 1, like life-threatening, and had to be hospitalized and some stuff. She's totally fine now. She's a pistol. She's a 9-year-old, and she's doing great. But it really scared us, and so we had them move in with us while she was recovering when we lived in the South Bay of the Bay Area. And then I said to my parents, I said, we should consider, caring for you guys in your senior season. We want you guys to have the best, setup you can possibly have. So talk them into selling their house and moving up here to the Bay Area, which is a big move for them. And so my parents, we started looking for properties that had space. And so we found a space out in the Santa Cruz Mountains, the 14 acres and 2 homes, 5 living spaces, just room. Right. And, so we started moving everyone here to the property, and I wanted to do something where my kids and my grandkids interacted with their grandparents and great grandparents, and we're able to do that. And we live, we don't have neighbors. We have neighbors, but they're like acres away. You got to hike to the neighbor's house. But the grandkids have each other and the cousins, and it's different. It has a lot of challenges with that, because you're a family unit and you can't move away from, you're going to see everybody at Christmas. So, it's got its unique challenges. We have something that we call sacred space and shared space. So sacred space is your own space. You manage and run that. Shared space is, there's rules, and you abide by the rules for the sake of the collective, right? So those get broken, you figure them out, but that's how I think, Matt. One of the things I cherish that I didn't really realize is watching my grandkids walk down from the other house to my house, walk right past my wife and I through the kitchen into they're going to go hang out with their great grandparents. They don't know how good they have it. They have they won't know until they're in high school, when they're asking their friends, you didn't grow up with your grandparents, or you didn't, they don't know. They just think this is normal. And, we wanted to create something that, built into some legacy stuff and to where we can invest in our kids. So we have a homeschool here, and we built a schoolhouse on the property, and yeah, it's been really fun. It has its challenges, but it's been a fun venture. And I do think family and being as close to family as you possibly can be is probably the best case scenario for folks, for sure, for support and stuff like that. Yeah.
I love it. We could go on for a bit, but I'd like you to just tell me a little bit about Forte and the redemptive work that you're doing right now and what you're excited about there.
Yeah. Forte again was born out of this idea of how can we come alongside you. Really, when you think about it, where does mental health come from? You can read Psalms 1, Psalm 20. You can read through the Psalms and see that God had been talking about the aspects of mental health that you hear a lot of people talk about: meditation and rest and quiet and journaling and processing. Like there's this whole inner life modality that scriptures walk you through. And again, we wanted to contextualize that for the marketplace without being canceled, and launch that into, companies and tech companies, blockchain across the US. And weirdly for us, we had a Christian school reach out, and we're like, hey, can we do this at our school for our educators? Not for the students, but for educators and faculty and staff. And it blew up in the schools. And then a denomination reached out and said, hey, can we do this for our pastors? And so we walked them through it. And now that has become our primary vertical that we focus on, which is churches, denominations, pastoral teams, church staff, and then educators, both public and private, and across the U.S., Christian, Catholic, anyone that actually is a human breathing that needs to know that. And it's usually people giving of themselves. And so Forte, what it does, it is you're providing confidential conversations, unlimited access to your team. So if you're an employer and you've got a team of 20, 30, 100,000, whatever, however many people you have, you provide it as if you would be providing a benefit for them. And they have unlimited. So it's not like the bronze package and I get 4 sessions and then my insurance kicks. You have unlimited access to a trained professional who serves as your guide. And when I say a guide, someone who is like a counselor who looks back, or a confidant who is in the present, or a coach who's looking forward, somebody who's processing with you in real time. Very much what I needed with my friends that I had accessibility to, and I needed to process in a confidential way. And then it starts with that, and then it has we push content to the individuals so they're partnering in their wellness journey and their mental fitness journey. Again, fitness being upstream, trying to get to people before they actually implode and struggle. So they actually have an outlet to process decision-making and feelings and identity and fear. So confidential conversations that are unlimited, content that's pushed to you that is related to your journey specifically. And then to the buyer or the employer, you get anonymized data that actually gives you a health score. And what you see in a lot of these benefit companies is that there's things that people offer to their team, but they have no idea if they use them. They have no idea is making some sort of impact. What's the ROI? And we're a data company, so we can tell you exactly without it identifying anybody. Here's very clear anonymized data that tells you where your people are. And you can supplement those things and really get a health score. What we found with the 500 plus organizations that we serve is that we are the number one utilized benefit that they offer. They add this onto their benefit stack and they're like, why are we paying for these other things? Nobody's using it, or we don't know if they are using it. And we have seen the return where people feel like, I feel a burden lifted. I feel listened to. I feel heard. I feel understood. And this really helped me process, whether it's a trial or a struggle or an opportunity. It's helped me. And a lot of that came out of mine and the other co-founders' journey of how do we help people process and transition. So, yeah, it gives a summary of it.
I love it. What do you think, just looking over your story and all of these transitions and where you see yourself today, like, what does that tell you about God and how he looks at you and your life?
It's weird because you put it, the context of, the metaphor of God is in scripture is the father heart of God. And as a father and your father, you understand a little bit of that, in that I want the best for my kids, but I know they're going to go through some crap that is going to be hard. But the things that they're going to learn isn't just so you learn it. I have, this is Ephesians 2:10, and creating Christ Jesus for good works. Creating Christ Jesus, meaning I have gone through stuff that's super hard. Not like, oh, he made me this unique way. Yes, it's those things and the hard things that I had to process through. And I've met people that are just steeped and shackled with bitterness because of what happened, and they couldn't get out of it. Those chains are still on them. And so what it does is just, you are created in Christ Jesus, but you are limited because you can't get past this shackle that you have. And again, it goes back to the jacuzzi. I had to sit in jacuzzi for a while. And I had to, get stirred up and had to sit there, but I can't stay there. And so if God is in the business of redeeming mankind, and he's in I think I have a son. I wouldn't sacrifice my son for everybody. Like the aspect of sacrificial, and he did it to the point where we're his ambassadors, as if he's pleading through us to be reconciled with him. If he's in that business, that's his business model. I think he would use every freaking thing that he can find. The next conversation that I'm going to have, the next broken opportunity that's going to open up this whole new piece. And as I wallow, I think God sits with people like, come on, stop wallowing. You get out of this. I got this for you. And yeah, you can have your emotions because I created you with them, but don't stay there. There's so much that's in front of you. Because again, I go back to, you're created in Christ Jesus for good works, which he prepared in advance for you to do. That goes until you drop dead. That goes until your life's over. I think I mentioned to you, I don't believe in retirement. I think retirement is a Western construct that's not biblical. There's nothing biblical about retirement at all. And so when I hear, especially with young athletes, who are 36 and I'm going to retire, and I'm like, find another word, man, because that word it means something stupid. You're 30, you're freaking 36. You got your whole life in front of you. And you're going to lay on a beach and golf. Like, that's not, you were designed to co-create with God to do things that are redemptive and for the world. Right. So, if something broke like it did for me, okay. You probably seen that, Jocko Willink video where he's like, good, where he talks, he's yeah. It's a really good video because it's one of those things you're like, oh, this broke. That didn't, your equipment failed. Good. Now what are you going to do? And it's this test of resiliency and, okay, what are you actually made of? And what does that mean? So, I think people resign themselves when God didn't resign, having you, on his team and doing stuff for the sake, and if you've been sidelined, if you sidelined yourself, that's fine. You're not sidelined forever. You made a mistake, own your mistake, move on. And what does God have for you? There's so much in front of you, so much. So, yeah. So I'm God's God of second, third, fourth, fifth chances. And he keeps, and again, it's about his, accomplishing his purposes and building his kingdom.
It ain't over till it's over.
It ain't over till you're in the box. And you just got to keep on keeping on. So, yeah.
Yeah. Jon,
this is good. This is a good conversation. I really love it. Thank you.
Yeah. There are moments I forgot we were podcasting. So this is good. If somebody wants to follow what's going on with Forte or any of the hijinks and activities of Jon Talbert Incorporated, what does that look like? Where can they go?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I try to post daily on LinkedIn and just thoughts, reflections on life and the different things that I'm learning along the way. I see things and I try to ask myself the question, what am I supposed to learn from this? And what am I supposed to see? So I post a lot on that and have conversation with people online. So Jon, Jon Talbert on LinkedIn. And then if you're interested in stuff at Forte, you can go to our website at getforte.com. And there's also, that's our public version. And then we have the faith version. You'll see that link on there, getforte.com and /faith. And it takes you to the churches and Christian schools and the really biblical worldview of why we set that up. We serve both markets. We have both sites up. But yeah, you can find us there.
Good. Well, hey, thanks for jumping on. Thanks for sharing your story of life after ministry. It's a good life, and God is good. Thankful for you.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. It's been really fun to be with you.
So how familiar does this story feel to you? Maybe you've been there sitting in that jacuzzi of disappointment and trying to make sense of what just happened. You didn't plan to leave. You didn't plan to start over, but here you are. If Jon's story reminds us of anything, it's this. God doesn't retire people. He redeploys them. And sometimes the field he sends you into is bigger, sometimes messier, and even more meaningful than the one you left. You may feel sidelined right now, maybe even shoved into a corner, but hear this, you are not done. There is still more ahead. If this episode hit close to home, I encourage you to follow Jon on LinkedIn and then go see the good work that they're doing at getforte.com. And if you're walking through a tough transition, don't do it alone. That is why we at Ministry Transitions exist. We're with you, and your story isn't over. Thanks for listening.